And Aho. These gentlemen would quiet all the critics wondering where they've been if they score the game winner in overtime. God's despair. They score! Seth Jarvis quiets the critics and ignites the crowd.
Game winner in overtime for Carolina last night to even up the Stanley Cup Finals at a game apiece. I could listen to Sean McDonough call hockey all night long. He is so damn good. Max texted me to say all tied up.
So tap in.
Late in the game. So I turned it on, and overtime hockey in the Stanley Cup Finals was good. It just didn't last long enough.
No.
It was over quickly. I want to ask you, on the goal that was disallowed, on the Vegas goal in the third period that was disallowed, did you think that was a good call for goaltender interference?
I do think that they needed to, the right call was no goal. Once the puck is covered and the ref makes the determination that the puck has been covered and goes to blow the whistle, that is when the play is dead. But they didn't blow the
whistle, right?
So it was like, it's a bang bang thing. It was very, because it's like the ref sees that the puck is covered, blows the whistle, and then the puck leaks out but they don't see it leak out and it's in the net. So you can't, it's when the ref decides that the play is dead. Okay. So that's kind of why that they went the direction.
But exciting, two really, really good games in Raleigh, North Carolina, where the Hurricanes play, and the Stanley Cup Finals are even at a game apiece. It'll head back to Vegas for Game 3. Tonight in the NBA Finals, Game 2 in San Antonio. It feels like a must-win situation for the Spurs. Stefan Castle said that we're okay. We know we're the better team. One thing that I did not talk a lot about because I was on vacation during the end of the Cleveland Knicks series is the Kenny Atkinson analytics were up 3-0 when they were down 3-0. How much was he ridiculed for those insane statements? The Cleveland Cavaliers head coach, who legitimately had one of the worst nights that a head coach can ever have in Game 1, not calling a timeout during a 17-0 run at one point when he had timeouts to use or lose, and then not getting James Harden off of Jalen Brunson. That was just an absolute tragic coaching job in Game 1. And then after Game 3, when they were down 3-0, he said that the analytics indicate that we should be up 3-0 in this series. You saw that, right, Max? Did
Spot
you guys
the lie, Kevin?
Huh?
Spot the lie. Where was he wrong? Analytics said so. He's right.
Oh my God. Unbelievably stupid. I think apparently Scott told me this because after Game 1, I called Van Pelt and said, what do people around the league think of Kenny Atkinson? Because I didn't know. And he said, he's highly regarded. He's well regarded. He really had a bad week, man. That was a bad week. You got to know when to not talk about what your analytics people are telling you. When you're down 3-0, I don't care that your analytics people are saying, look, based on this, we should have this result. Based on this is what we want. We're just not getting the result. Stick with it. We'll be okay. That's fine. Just don't talk about it publicly. Good morning, everybody. I got this from my guy, Seth in Potomac. You're a mensch, Kevin. Terry is better than Christian Watson. That had to be hard for you. No, not really, Seth. It wasn't hard for me. None of the Terry conversation is hard for me. I share with all of you what I feel and have felt about him. I wouldn't take him right now over Drake London. Nobody in the league would, just so you know. But Christian Watson is a different player. I don't think Christian Watson's a bad player. I don't think that he didn't deserve the money that he got. He got a big contract extension as well. I just wouldn't take him over Terry. He drops way too many passes for my liking. Drake London's a completely different subject altogether. He's 24 years old. He's 6'4", he's 220. And I've watched him dominate football games at that position. with a real quarterback, which he had for one season in 2024. This from Bevy99. Bevy writes, Kevin, I'm for anybody that can play wide receiver, but they have to have pelts on their wall. It's always one of my favorite Doc-isms. Diggs, Ayuk, even Booty. I'm all for that. Can't count on anybody currently on the roster other than 17, as in Terry McLaurin. So, since the show ended yesterday, there have been stories about Kayshon Boutte, the wide receiver in New England, being a potential trade piece for the Patriots after they acquired A.J. Brown. And Dan Graziano from ESPN reported the Patriots have received calls on Boutte and likely will continue to do so. And as always, until we see a contract extension, we're justified in wondering whether the player is in the team's long-term plans. The Raiders and Commanders stand out as two teams that could still use help at wide receiver. So there was that. There was also a report from Mark Morales-Smith of Sports Illustrated talking about Boutte to Washington, saying Terry McLaurin's the only locked-in starting wide receiver. Behind him on their depth chart are third-round rookie Antonio Williams, Treylon Burks, and De'Ami Brown. Boutte could go to Washington and immediately step in as their wide receiver 2 behind Terry McLaurin. If the Commanders don't end up landing Brandon Ayuk, Boutte would be a fine consolation prize. So we have a new name in the mix. I know that some of you believe guys like Brian Thomas Jr., and others should be in the mix, should be in the conversation. That's fine. Look, I am where Bevy99 is as well. I'd feel much more comfortable if there was a proven wide receiver opposite Terry McLaurin to open up the 2026 season. I'd feel much better about that. And, Boutte played with Jaden Daniels for that 1 year in 22. That was Jaden's first year in Baton Rouge. And his receivers were neighbors. Boutte, Mason Taylor was the tight end, Jason Taylor's son. Brian Thomas Jr. was on that team. And Boutte caught 48 passes that year for 538 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden's 22 season in Baton Rouge was a good season, and there were memorable moments, including the overtime win over Alabama in Death Valley. But 23 ended up being just the lights out start to finish season. He was, finding his way through that first half of 22 and then really came on. Meantime, Boutte got picked by New England in the 6th round of the 23 draft, barely played in 23 as a rookie. But then in Drake May's first season, 43 catches, 589 yards. And then last year, 33 catches, 551 yards. He's right around 5'11", 6 feet. He's a good route runner. All of the Patriots receivers last year were excellent route runners. The scheme certainly had something to do with it as well. I think there's been a lot written about the Patriots 2025 season. It was such a fascinating season because they weren't expected to be very good. And they ended up winning the division. And they ended up winning 13 football games during the course of 14 football games. Excuse me. They were 14-3. And they really were prolific at times through that first 3 quarters of the season offensively, whereas defensively, they weren't great. And then they came on late in the season, and then that defense was lights out in the postseason against the Chargers, Texans, Broncos, and then, of course, Seattle got to them, but they couldn't do anything offensively against Seattle's defense. And really, offensively, they completely bogged down. I mean, Drake May was legitimately horrible in the postseason, but was outstanding during the regular season. He was, and he's young, and I thought he looked the part, and I think he's going to be really good. And I think that they had a lot going for them offensively with the scheme. They had a guy in Diggs that was an excellent, reliable number one, but they had, a lot of other pieces. You go back to that game that they played on Sunday Night Football when it became apparent that, hey, they might be for real, because that night they couldn't run the football. And Diggs had 10 catches for 146 yards in Buffalo on a Sunday night. Booty had 3 catches for 43 yards. Demario Douglas was getting open. Hunter Henry was getting open. Travion Henderson started to become more of what they were doing offensively. But now they've added A.J. Brown, to replace Diggs because Diggs is no longer there. But they're looking to move Booty, who right now has 1 year left on his rookie deal. He's playing under that 4-year rookie contract. He was the 6th rounder, so there's no 5th-year option. I mean, it's barely a salary cap hit at about $3.7 million. And what are you going to give up to trade for him? I can't imagine it's going to be any more than a day 3 pick and maybe a later day 3 pick, maybe more of a 6th or a 7th rounder. Maybe it's a 5th, because he was a 6th and he's played well. He was important for them. But that would be a guy, Bevy 99, that would have some pelts on the wall. And I'd be okay with that. I just want somebody else. And I know that there's a lot of positive discussion about Antonio Williams. He's a rookie. He's a 3rd-round pick. Doesn't mean that he's not going to turn out to be the next 3rd-round pick that turns into Terry McLaurin. That would be awesome. I know there's been a lot of positive talk about Treylon Burks. Blau said the other day that he's, definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And there was a reason they signed him pretty quickly and brought him back because he was a former 1st-round guy. He does have size. He does have excellent hands. We saw that in the Denver Sunday night game. I would hope there's still some belief in McCaffrey. I always liked Van Jefferson. I don't know if he even makes this football team, but I always thought that he played bigger than he was. And then there's been this recent talk because Zach Selby, who writes on the team's website, essentially wrote a story about how Jaden Bradley, an undrafted free agent from UNLV, who's 6'4", apparently just torched people during OTAs. I mean, for every story over the years of somebody looking really good in OTAs and then not even making the football team or barely making a dent if they did make the football team. Who knows? Maybe Jaden Bradley will end up being the guy. But when I look at it, I'm like, I want something that is known opposite Terry McLaurin. De'Ami Brown's on the roster. Great. De'Ami is not a true number 2. I don't think he is. I don't think Luke McCaffrey's shown enough to be a true number 2. Maybe Burks is a guy that it took some time. It takes time for these guys. A lot of these guys don't get it right away. He's still super young and talented. He was the reason he was picked in the 1st round. He's got really good size, got good hands. Maybe it's him. But if you tell me if Dan Graziano says they're interested, they're one of the 2 teams that are interested, I'm fine with that. It could be that there's recent interest because they have essentially said, yeah, we're not going to wait for Brandon Ayuk. Yeah, it's not worth waiting for Brandon Ayuk. All of those things are possible. There's a lot about the Brandon Ayuk situation we just don't know. They know, and even maybe what we don't know is that they don't know as much as we'd hope they'd know. But yeah, I thought he was a really solid receiver. I think he's versatile. He can play the X. He can play the Z. I think he can really be moved around, as I think they'll move Terry around. I think we're going to see a lot of that. Somebody, where is it? Dude's name was Dalton. Here it is. Dalton sent me a note and just said that it looks like David Blau sees Terry the same way Scott Turner did, which is as a guy that can move around and end up pre-snap in the slot. I'd expect some of that. Absolutely. Remember, Scott Turner did a good job with Terry McLaurin, moving him around and getting him into good matchups for Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz and whomever else was playing quarterback. And yeah, I think it was 22, maybe more so than 21. But you had Terry lined up in the slot a lot more than anybody anticipated, and he was matched up at times against linebackers. Mismatch. Safeties, mismatch. Third corner, mismatch. Yeah, I expect a lot of that. So Booty would bring versatility and wouldn't be very costly. I think that's one of the things I've talked about this for years. I think the thing that we get wrong a lot, of course, the draft is always something that is a complete crapshoot for us, but is trade compensation, trying to guess because you don't know what the market is, and it never ends up being exactly what you think or even what is reported. But I can't imagine you'd have to give up a night 2 pick. No way. It's a day 3 pick, and it feels to me like it's a 5th rounder, something like that, for a guy that did have a good season. He last year, in that season, I mean, 33 catches, but 6 touchdowns on 33 catches. And remember, he had that excellent touchdown catch in the playoff game against Houston, which was just of all of the playoff games that were played, out of all of them in January of 2026, that was the one in which I felt like the winning team got lucky. Because there is no way DeMeco Ryans should have allowed his offensive coordinator to continue to drop back C.J. Stroud over and over again on that day with the weather and the defense that the Patriots were playing. All they had to do was punt 10 times, and they probably would have won the game. But instead, he threw 4 interceptions, and they lost a football game that they still had a chance to win. And their punter punted like 5 or 6 times. Should have been 10 or 11, and they would have won the game. They should have lined up and punted it on 1st or 2nd down and just put their defense back out onto the field over and over again. Man, we haven't seen, I know this is going back to the end of last season, but man, last year was a real renaissance, resurgence of defensive football in the NFL. It really was fun to watch in the postseason to see New England's defense and Houston's defense and Denver's defense and Seattle's defense. Ultimately, the best defensive team in the NFL or in the NFC got to the Super Bowl, and maybe in terms of the way they were playing, the 2nd or 3rd best defensive team in the AFC got to the Super Bowl. I wonder if 2026 will be the same, because how long did we talk about here and everywhere else in all of your circles about how, man, the old defense wins championships, offense puts people in the seats, defense wins championships thing is so outdated. It wasn't last year. It wasn't. Now, some of the best quarterbacks in the league went down last year. There was no Mahomes in the playoffs. There was no Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. There was no Jaden Daniels in the playoffs. All right. We'll kick it off this morning with some football talk. Would you be okay sending New England a day 3 pick for Kayshon Boutte and having him be the guy, the answer to who's the number 2 receiver in 2026? Or would you rather hold out for either Ayuk or just go get Diggs right now? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Dan Graziano from ESPN and Mark Morales from Sports Illustrated both suggesting that New England wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, who played with Jaden Daniels at LSU for 1 year in 2022, that was Jaden's first year at LSU. Malik Neighbors was there, Brian Thomas Jr., Boutte, Mason Taylor. I mean, they were loaded at wide receiver like they usually are, and at tight end in that particular case. But with the trade for A.J. Brown, Boutte could be on the block, and they may be looking to move him. This would be a guy that's played for the last 2 seasons, played a lot of snaps, caught 43 balls in 24 for 589 yards, caught 33 passes last year for 551 yards, 6 touchdown catches last year. In the postseason, 9 catches for 168 yards, averaged over 18 yards a catch for an offense that really, really struggled in the postseason and had that incredible catch against the Texans for a touchdown. Nobody did much in that Super Bowl offensively. He had just 1 catch for 21 yards in the Super Bowl, and that came in the second half. Remember, New England could barely budge possession by possession as it went on through the first half. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I mean, the question really macro is, here we are on June 5th. 2 months from now, 8 weeks from now, they'll be gearing up for their first preseason game. Who do you want to be the number 2 receiver? What's the solution? Is Boutte acceptable, or would you rather go out and get Diggs, or would you rather wait on Ayuk? Or is there a group of you that perhaps thinks, hey, in 2024, with essentially the same kind of group, a lot of the same pieces because they brought Diami back, it was a top 3, top 4 offense in the NFL. We're okay. We just need to be better on defense. Let me just say this. Give me, a choice in either or. I'm taking better on defense, and I'll leave the offense up to Jaden and what they have. But it's not an either or. You can get both, and they can afford both. And they tried to come up with an answer for their number 2 receiver. They went after Alec Pierce. They went after Romeo Doubs. And, somebody brought up the point yesterday to me, I think on phone lines, that if they weren't waiting for Ayuk, then they would have already made a move on Diggs. Maybe this is the kind of move that will also tell us they're not waiting on Ayuk. Although, again, neither one is mutually exclusive in this particular instance. I think Diggs is. I don't think you can get Diggs and Ayuk. I think Diggs wouldn't want to come here if they were also planning to sign Brandon Ayuk at some point. Stephon Diggs doesn't want to be a number 3 receiver. He's been a number 1 for his entire career. And, if he were to join the team with Terry McLaurin and with Brandon Ayuk and himself, where does that leave him? I think he'd probably choose somewhere else. I don't know that for sure. But 301-230-0980, would you do it? Look, I'm open for anything that brings me a guy that has, as my emailer Bevy99 says, some pelts on the wall. You may look at Diami and say, well, Diami's got the pelts. Is Diami really a number 2? Boutte's a really good route runner. He's also versatile. He can play the X if you put him out there. He can certainly be your number 2 as your Z receiver. He can play. I think he can play in the slot. He's flexible. I think they have a lot of guys that actually do have real flexibility, including apparently the rookie, Antonio Williams. All right, we got phone lines open if you want to weigh in, 301-230-0980. Let's start with Michael. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Kevin?
What's up, Michael?
I'm with you, man. I want a proven receiver who we seen who can do it, like Diggs. I wouldn't mess with Boutte. Also, I would like to bring in Ayuk. I mean, I don't think there's no such thing as too much good talent on our team. You know what I mean? And I don't understand why Adam Peters have not addressed this issue with the receiver core. The reporter from the Athletic, the female reporter,
Nikki.
she described our receiver core as incredibly weak. That's not good. You know what I mean? And I don't understand why Adam is just so nonchalant about the whole situation.
Well, I don't think he's nonchalant. They went after Pierce. They went after Dobbs in free agency. You know, they wanted to spend big on Pierce. They were, in on Dobbs. They didn't get either one of them. That's not nonchalant.
I'm listening.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you can say not successful in their ability to add a number 2 wide receiver so far in this offseason, but I think nonchalant's an unfair description because by all accounts, they were all in day one on free agency on Pierce, and then certainly in the first few days, on Dobbs. They just didn't land either one of them. So now, where are they? Well, they went out and they obviously kept Burks, but they added Diami, they added Van Jefferson. They drafted a guy that they were going to draft more likely than not anyway, even if they had signed Pierce or Dobbs. They probably were going to look at another receiver in the draft. But it's fair to say that they haven't delivered at this point. On a number 2 receiver, I don't think it's fair to say that they haven't tried or that they've been nonchalant. Anyway, Max, what do you think? I didn't ask you.
So,
do you like Booty?
Yeah, love Booty.
I do too. I think he is a guy that absolutely fits a number 2 role. He's not a high-end number 2, but he's a number 2, and he's got the history with Jaden. I think he's a really good route runner.
Yeah, I think this past year he really showed off like his deep threat ability and like the back shoulder throws that Drake was throwing to him.
Yeah.
Jaden is also incredibly good at that. So I would love to see him kind of in that wide receiver 2 role with Diami kind of as a third lurking around there. I think that could be a dangerous core.
Yeah, I just look at it and I think right now, if they don't add anybody else on opening day at the Link against Philadelphia, it's Terry, it's Diami, I think for sure, and it's Burks. And maybe Antonio Williams is ready to go early in the season. I know most of you already have him plugged in and have him as a Rookie of the Year candidate, and maybe that'll play out. Who knows? Hopefully it does. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what happens. And look, I mean, they were really effective in 2024 without a true number 2. Noah Brown, okay, when he was healthy, is he a true number 2? Yes, he just couldn't stay healthy. Yeah, I look at it and I don't see Lane being a number 2. I'm not sure about McCaffrey. Maybe it is Burks. Maybe it is him. Hannibal, go ahead. You there, Hannibal?
Yes. How you doing, Kevin? How you doing?
What's up, Hannibal? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your service, man. I've been listening for years, all the way back to the regular 980. But saying it to say is, I think if Jaden Daniels is the quarterback that we all know he is, then let's look at the Tom Brady model. He made a lot of receivers great. Instead of trying to chase a Ayuk or a Stephon Diggs, let Jaden Daniels grow with these receivers, and they can become the number 1 or number 2. The first example I think of is Deion Branch being the Super Bowl MVP. Yeah. Nobody would have thought that, but having a great quarterback will elevate receivers. And I think our receiver room doesn't need to be messed with, because I think Peters last year made a mistake not trusting the consistency of the receivers we had in 2024. So I think we should stay with them, build the offensive line, the running game, and let Jaden.
Well, I don't think he wanted to give Diami $10 million for 1 year, which is what Jacksonville did. But yeah, look, to your point, the Deion Branch, Troy Brown, David Patton, going back to the early days, all that's true. And the game has changed a lot since then. And let's also point out that their most prolific offensive football teams were with Randy Moss. They were.
I agree.
It's one of the best offensive football teams we've ever seen. So
I agree.
Yeah,
but I'm not saying Terry McLaurin is Randy Moss, but we have that one. right? So we have the number
Yeah,
one.
but we don't have Randy Moss. We're not going to go down that.
Right.
You're not going to get me in trouble by saying that Terry McLaurin's not Randy Moss, because some of our fans probably think he's played at that level. And if he had had Tom Brady, he would have been Randy Moss. Or if he had had Randall Cunningham, he would have been Randy Moss. I'm kidding, of course. Go ahead.
I'm with you. So now I just want to close with that. I do agree. I just think this to kind of go back and not to play too much on it, but I agree not paying De'Ami 10, but it's something to be said. We keep talking about quarterbacks on their rookie contract, right? So we also talk about being consistent from year to year. Mm-hmm. So even though he didn't want to play De'Ami, if he knew he was going to kind of go to the war with Terry about the contract, why not pay the money? Because now you at least have a rapport for Jaden Daniels' second year. I feel like we lost a year on his rookie contract because of the receiver situation in 2025. So,
well, we didn't lose a year on his rookie contract because of the receiver situation. We lost a year on his rookie contract because he didn't play. He only played in 4 complete football games, and he and Terry only played in a game and a half together. So we didn't see what last year with Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin and company. We never had a chance to really see what that may have looked like over a 17-game season. So, we keep going back to last year, and thanks for the call. I appreciate it, Hannibal. This is the absolute most frustrating part of this offseason conversation about 25 is when people look back and suggest things like, wow, Jaden really regressed. The offense really regressed. They didn't do enough at wide receiver before 2025. Look, it's true that you could identify wide receiver as a position that didn't have enough depth to overcome injuries, but we never had a chance to really see what anything would have looked like because the quarterback didn't play enough. Your best player didn't play enough. When your best player is your quarterback and he only plays in 7 games and only in 4 start to finish, your season is doomed no matter what you've done around him. Look, I just brought up Deebo. Deebo's still out there. Now, you might say, well, Antonio Williams is Deebo or De'Ami's back to play sort of the Deebo role. Deebo's really not a number 2. He's more of an overall weapon. I just want people out there that have done it before, done it at a pretty high level, played in some meaningful football games in recent years. I'm actually a little bit intrigued with Deebo Samuel and the possibility that he remains available heading into training camp. Would they? I don't think they would, but I definitely believe that they thought they got a lot out of Deebo Samuel last year and that they would have loved to have seen what it would have looked like with Jaden playing rather than Mariota and Josh Johnson for the majority of the games. Like, they would have absolutely loved to have seen what it would have looked like with Terry, Deebo. I don't know who would have been. I guess they were planning on Luke sort of being in that mix. Jalen Lane ended up being in the mix. I think that they would have loved to have seen what that would have looked like. They could see what it looks like in 2026 if they were interested in bringing Deebo back. There are a couple of things in mind. First of all, if they were going to bring him back, they may have done it already instead of going out and getting De'Ami Brown, Van Jefferson, also drafting Antonio Williams. 2 is, will the Blau system be better or worse for Deebo? You would certainly think that it would be better because he essentially played in it in San Francisco. But is there too much redundancy with Deebo? I don't know that there's ever redundancy with Deebo. I think Deebo's that good. Deebo caught 72 balls last year for 727 yards in basically 15 games. With backup quarterbacks and third-string quarterbacks. Josh Johnson for the last 2, Marcus Mariota for basically, 12 or 11 games, and Jaden for 4, start to finish. Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about Deebo in a while. He's still out there. And I think they liked Deebo overall. Also, don't forget, Deebo is a really good kickoff returner. Until he got banged up, and then they said, yeah, we won't do that. We'll do Luke instead. And Luke ended up being a really good kickoff returner. I think both of them averaged over 30 yards per return. Am I right about that?
I believe you are, and I think it's not just them. Like Austin Eckler, when he was returning kicks, like I think the Commanders have just figured it out.
Yeah, Izzo's done a good job. Where were we on kickoff return average? Okay, kickoff return average, 27 yards per kickoff return. That ended up being 9th in the league. Washington's special teams, I think, finished per DVOA 2nd behind Seattle's.
I say, it feels like they should have been higher on that list.
Yeah, let's just see what the individuals were for McCaffrey and Debo, because I think they were both over 30. McCaffrey was 29.6 yards per return, and Debo was 30.1. He was over 30. He had just 15 opportunities. And remember, when he got banged up, they put Luke back there and said, we're not gonna put Debo back there on returns. Where was his big return? Did he have the big return against the Raiders? Was it the Raider game that he had a huge return?
I want to say yes, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it may have been the Raider game. I'm looking it up right now. But, yeah, it was the Raider game that he had the really big return, had a 69-yard return against the Raiders in week 3. I would assume it's Lane, it's McCaffrey on returns. Who am I forgetting? I guess Antonio Williams can return, but why would they do that when they already have guys like Lane and McCaffrey? McNichols was back there. I'm just looking at the roster right now. He's been back there before. No, it's kickoff returns right now are going to be McCaffrey, and punt returns are going to be Lane, right? Lane should definitely be the punt returner.
I mean, he was pretty much exclusively last year the punt returner.
He was excellent.
So,
I'm not sure that he can really be at this point, year 2, maybe year 2, but there wasn't anything overwhelmingly obvious about, he's going to be a great receiver. But there were a lot of signs that he can be a very good returner, punt returner. And then McCaffrey, look, kickoff returns are huge now. McCaffrey was excellent. Excellent. What about Debo? Do you think there's any chance? I mean, we know now that there's no chance of Bobby Wagner because of who they drafted. Are we saying there's absolutely no chance on Debo?
I wouldn't say no chance, but I mean, I feel like it's pretty slim at this point. But at the same time, you never really know what guys are doing, during OTA time of season. And then once camp gets going, maybe some more signings get pushed through. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure. It would be definitely interesting to bring him back and add him to this core, though.
Let me just say, I don't think there's much of a chance of it happening. I think it's interesting to ponder as we continue to go, get closer to training camp, and they haven't added another obvious, number 2 guy, that he's still out there. But I would imagine Debo is sitting there going, I'm not joining anybody until training camp. I'm not into OTAs and mini camps, because that's what you get a lot this time of year. It might be what Diggs is doing too. Diggs might be saying the same thing. Maybe Diggs is on the verge of signing with somebody once all of these off-season activities are done, and then he can just gear up for training camp. That happens a lot with veteran players, is they're not so much into, having to say no to OTAs or having to show up to mandatory minicamp. Real quickly, because I mentioned this yesterday or the day before, there is reporting, and I think Barry Zerluga, who now writes for The Athletic, I think Barry actually mentioned this as well, that if Brandon Ayuk had just shown up for any of the 49er OTA days, and the 49ers, I guess, have canceled their minicamp, which was scheduled for this upcoming weekend or maybe next weekend, which, by the way, just tells you, okay, that teams themselves, they like to get everybody together. They like people to kind of show up and, be able to see their faces and check their conditioning and the whole thing. But not a lot is being accomplished during these off-season voluntary get-togethers in particular, and even the mini camps. But the idea that that Ayuk could have just shown up and they would have been forced to cut him or take him off the reserve list is an interesting thing also, in that he didn't. Again, how much does he want this? If all he had to do was just show up, no matter how awkward and uncomfortable it may have been, if all he had to do was show up and then they would have released him rather than being forced to pull him off whatever reserve list he's on, and he didn't do it, again, you got to wonder if that's actually true. I know multiple people have reported that if he had just shown up, they would have been forced to do something with respect to his status. And a lot of people feel that if he had shown up, they just would have cut him. But right now, it's easy for them to say, we don't even know where he is. He doesn't respond to us. And then cut him on August 31st. All right. 50 years ago today, one of the most incredible moments in NBA Finals history. It's also one of the first moments I remember as a kid. That's next. This happened 50 years ago tonight.
Wanting somebody to stand back. Won't start till it's touched. They'll have to throw it up. Garland, turnaround shot in the air. It's good. It's tied again. I don't believe it. Garfield heard at the buzzer. Threw one in outside. We've got a third overtime in the Boston Garden. It's 112-112. Unbelievable sequence.
Brent Musburger on the call of the 1976 NBA Finals, the fifth game in the Boston Garden between the Phoenix Suns and the Celtics in a series that was tied up at 2 games apiece. Many call this the greatest NBA playoff game of all time. It is one of my early memories as a kid watching that game, my dad letting me stay up and watch that game, that got me hooked, not just on the NBA, but on sports in general, because it was one of the wildest games in NBA history. The Celtics won the game in 3 overtimes, 128 to 126, to take a 3-2 series lead. They went on to win Game 6 back in Phoenix and win the NBA title in 1976. But what happened during the final few minutes of regulation of the first overtime and of the second overtime is legendary for people who watched it. This is considered to be the most dramatic and, by all accounts, the greatest NBA playoff game of all time, a half century ago. I'll take you through a couple of the key moments. First of all, Gar Hurd played 61 minutes in the game. That is still an NBA Finals record. 61 minutes he played. 48, and there were 15 possible in the 3 overtimes. He played in 13 of the 15 minutes, and that was his shot at the end of the second overtime. But how they got to that shot was incredible. So at the end of the second overtime, the score was 109-106 Boston. And Phoenix's Dick Van Arsdale hit a jumper from the corner to make it 109-108. Havlicek, John Havlicek, all-time great NBA Hall of Famer. This was not Havlicek steals the ball. That came many years earlier. The ball came into him, and the Suns guard, Paul Westphal, who was, maybe some of you only remember him as a coach in the NBA, he came out of nowhere, stole the pass, passed the ball to Curtis Perry, who knocked down a shot, and all of a sudden, with just 5 seconds to go, it's 110-109. Phoenix, they've got the lead. Boston advances the ball to half court, and Havlicek hits a runner with 2 seconds to go to give the Celtics a 111-110 lead. And Phoenix, the clock should have stopped, okay? But even back then, the clock stopped in the final, minute of the game when it went through the net before the inbounds pass. The clock ran out. Celtics fans stormed the court. The Celtics ran off the court as if the game was over, but there were still 2 seconds left, or at the very least, a second left in the game. And that's where some incredible strategy came in. First of all, in the mayhem that followed the Havlicek, what Celtic fans thought was the game winner, the fans stormed the court. Richie Powers was the lead referee in the game. A Celtic fan attacked him on the floor, tackled him to the ground. I mean, all hell was breaking loose. Fans went to the scorer's table and overturned the scorer's tables. It was just complete and utter pandemonium, as if Havlicek had just won the game. Meantime, people jumped in, cops jumped in, pulled the fan off the referee, Richie Powers, who was an older guy. I mean, he was probably in his 60s, may have been older than that. And they arrested the fan. They threw the fans that spilled the scorer's table over. They threw them out of the game. But the referees knew that more time should be put back on the clock. So they got the Celtics to come back out of their locker room. They put a second onto the clock. Now, this is where some amazing strategy came in. All-time great thinking by the head coach of the Phoenix Suns, John McLeod, and maybe even his best player, Paul Westphal. Something that could never happen today, but it did happen 50 years ago tonight. And I'll explain it to you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Proud chanting defense. Lumpkin, West. call out there, pleading the Phoenix case with Powers. They're going to call a timeout now. If they have a timeout left, they will call it. Do they have one left, Mindy, or have they used both of them?
Not have any timeouts left. I would not be surprised now if they will call an extra timeout to gain the distance and have a technical foul assist.
Let him shoot it.
Possibly score from down there.
111, 110. JoJo White is making a 2-point basketball game. He does. Now the final second of play here in the Boston Garden.
The strategy of calling a timeout that they didn't have was the idea of Paul Westphal in what was many believe to be the greatest NBA playoff game of all time 50 years ago tonight. The New York Times wrote this: 13 National Basketball Association banners hang from the rafters of Old Boston Garden. Each was put there by a Boston Celtic championship filled with the sentiment and memories of great basketball moments. But as long as people compare and discuss sports, arguments will always develop over whether the fifth game of the championship series between the Boston Celtics and Phoenix Suns was the best and most exciting basketball game ever played. A very young Bob Ryan, longtime Boston writer, wrote the day after, quote, "What do you say after you've just seen the greatest game of professional basketball ever played? That there should have been two winners, that it should have been a bargain at $250 courtside, that no matter what happens in the final two games of the 1976 finals, two teams with heart are competing in the finals. Perhaps rarely in the history of any professional sport have so many incredible clutch plays been turned in during one game by so many people." It was insane. And for me, to make it personal, I remember this game so well. My father letting me stay up to watch it. And it was truly one of those games, watching it, that turned me into a massive sports fan. I do remember the year before, the Bullets were in the NBA Finals in 1975, and they got swept by Golden State and Rick Barry, who was on the call of this this Game 5 in Boston Garden in 1976 with Brent Musburger. A game that went 3 overtimes, that included one clutch play after another, but included just so many controversies and so many incredible, crazy scenes that you just would never, ever see today. Back then, it was very routine after even, just a playoff game, for fans to run on fields, for fans to run on the court. That was not an unusual thing at all. And at the end of the second overtime, when John Havlicek hit a runner with 2 seconds to go to give the Celtics a 111-110 lead in the second overtime, the fans swarmed the floor as the clock ran out, but the clock shouldn't have run out. The clock should have stopped. And so during the fans storming the court, fans attacked referee Richie Powers. Literally people had to be pulled off of him at the middle of the court. Cops had to pull him off. People overturned the scorer's table. Boston fans were insane. And it was, back then, it was more than just hostile. It could be gross in Boston. You've probably seen a lot of, NBA or sports discussions about, the segregated Boston and what it was like, for black players after Bill Russell, et cetera. But it was complete and utter lunacy when Havlicek hit that shot. And then they had to bring the Celtics back out of their locker room. They put a second back out onto the clock, not two. And Phoenix didn't have timeouts left. And yes, back then, a timeout that you don't have, if you call it, it is a technical foul. But you don't lose possession of the ball, and you get the benefits of the timeout. So instead of taking the ball out, needing to go the length of the court with 1 second to go, down by one, Paul Westphal, the best player on the Phoenix Suns team, convinced the head coach, John McLeod, Let's just take the technical foul, take the timeout. Even if they make the free throw, we're only down 2, 112 to 110. And then we'll at least have a prayer of getting to inbound the ball at half court. They took the timeout. They got hit with the tech. They moved the ball to half court. JoJo White, longtime Celtic, buried the free throw, 112-110. And then Gar Hurd caught the inbounds, turned, fired, and knocked down the shot at the buzzer to force the third overtime. One of the most dramatic moments in NBA history. The Brent Musburger call. Cue that up again, Max. The Brent Musburger call of the Gar Hurd shot with, by the way, fans lining the court. They had pushed the fans back after they stormed the court, but they weren't back in their seats. They were ready to storm the floor again. It was an unbelievable scene, and here they are throwing the ball in with 1 second to go, and one of Brent Musburger's all-time calls.
Wanting somebody to stand back. Won't start till it's touched. They'll have to throw it up. Garland, turnaround, shot in the air. It's good. It's tied again. I don't believe it. Garfield heard at the buzzer, threw one in outside. We got a third overtime in the Boston Garden. It's 112-112. Unbelievable sequence.
Unbelievable sequence, unbelievable game. You would never see the fan scene that you saw there. They've been so much more protective, obviously, over the years. Although we did have the other night in game 1, a fan able to run out onto the court while the action was going on. His intention was to take a selfie with Wemby. But this game was unbelievably incredible. By the way, when Hurd hit that shot, fans that were lining the baseline started to run out to celebrate, and then they were like, oh my God, did it count? Yes, it counted. And to the third overtime. The drama of sports in that moment hooked me. I'm not saying that I wasn't hooked maybe a few years before with the Redskins, because I was a big Redskins fan, obviously. 71's really the first season I remember. But that game is memorable in my childhood. It was a game that really made sports so thrilling, so unexpected, so unpredictable. And it hooked me 50 years ago. Wow. Remember exactly where I was, sitting with my father in my parents' bedroom, watching it on some small, it was a color TV, but it was a very small color TV with rabbit ears that we were probably moving around multiple times to try to get the best picture. Some of you know what I'm talking about. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Do you have a moment, a game that you're like, I'm hooked? I'm hooked on football. I'm hooked on sports. I'm hooked on this. Made me hooked on the NBA. And I've been into the NBA ever since. That game, still to this day, considered to be the greatest game ever played. There are stories about this game out today, yesterday, and today. And there was a book written called The Fabulous Fifth, 1976, with all of the excerpts that came out the day after, all of the print media's accounts of that game. It's pretty cool to read, from Phoenix to Boston to New York and to other places. But that was truly dramatic. 301-230-0980. Give me the game or the moment where you were hooked on something sports-wise. That was it for me and the NBA, for sure. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Game 5 of the 1976 NBA Finals between the Celtics and the Suns is a game that, for me, hooked me on the NBA. I'll never forget that night watching it with my father, him letting me stay up and watch it. The shot by Gar Heard to force a third overtime. It is considered to be the most entertaining and best played NBA playoff game of all time, and certainly had just unbelievable scenes that weren't even basketball related around that game. The attacking of the referee, Richie Powers, at the end of the second overtime, fans lining the floor for the final, second of the second overtime, the dramatic nature of a shot going in to force a third overtime with the road team hitting it after an incredible strategic move by Paul Westphal to convince his coach to call a timeout that they didn't have, take the technical foul, give up the point, but get to move the ball, get to advance the ball to half court. I was looking at the box score of this game. I don't have the exact number, but I will tell you there are at least 6 players in this game that became future head coaches. Gar Heard, Paul Westphal, and Alvin Adams from Phoenix, and I think Dick Van Arsdale may have been a head coach as well. And then for the Celtics, Paul Silas, Don Nelson, and was Cowens a coach? I forget if Dave Cowens ended up becoming a coach. Havlicek was not a coach, but a lot of, future NBA head coaches in that game. A game the Celtics did go on to win 128-126 in 3 overtimes. Gar Heard still holds the finals record for minutes in a game. He played 61 of the available 63 minutes in that game and had really what has been referred to as the shot heard round the world in NBA parlance. Not in baseball parlance. My question at 301-230-0980 is, what's the moment? What's the game? What's the fight? What's the event that you remember that really hooked you on sports, or hooked you on football or basketball or baseball or whatever it is, that really turned you into a fanatic, a real fan of that sport? And maybe it had lifelong sort of impact. I can tell you that game is still so fresh in my memory, remembering exactly how it went down 50 years ago. 301-230-0980. Max, you're much younger, but do you have a game that hooked you on sports, or hooked you on a sport?
Yeah, there are a bunch of instances. Like, I could point to my falling in love with hockey and basketball when I got to go to a bunch of games as a kid, because my grandmother's law firm got a bunch of tickets that were damn close and really good seats. But the moment that I really knew that I was hooked on football was 2008, Raymond James Stadium, Pittsburgh Steelers, Arizona Cardinals. That was that Super Bowl. I was in 3rd grade. My teacher, she was a Steelers fan. She was like, no homework for a week if the Steelers win. So we were rooting hard for the Steelers. And when Hines Ward caught that pass in corner of the end zone, that was unbelievable. That really is what hooked me kind of on football forever.
Yeah, that's a great Super Bowl. If that's your real first, Super Bowl, the James Harrison play at the end of the first half is obviously one of the all-time greats. And then obviously the Roethlisberger to Santonio Holmes. I'll tell you who played great in that game, and I don't even have the numbers, but God, Kurt Warner was so great in that game. And I remember people saying, he needed to win one of the other 2 Super Bowls that he lost to get into the Hall of Fame. I'm like, really? Seriously? He lost 1 Super Bowl on a walk-off field goal against the Patriots, and another one on a walk-off, basically touchdown pass. 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. Warner was in that Super Bowl. God, he was great in that game. And wasn't Larry Fitzgerald awesome too?
So good.
7 catches, 127 yards. Whew. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. 50 years ago tonight, the Celtics-Phoenix Suns Game 5 of the NBA Finals was one of those moments that is so indelible for me. and was so influential in my love of the NBA, my love of sports. I was already there on the Skins and the Terps, at that point. But God, that is still one of the craziest, most incredible sporting events that I can ever remember watching on television. Many call it the greatest NBA playoff game of all time. What was that moment for you, Ivan? Ivan in Florida, go ahead.
Kevin, what's up, man? How you doing,
What's
man?
up,
Welcome
Ivan?
back, man.
Thanks.
Hey, look, Kevin, for me and probably millions in the 60s, it's no question about it, it's Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali fought, you stopped everything that you were doing, to listen to it on the radio or TV, and Howard Cosell, he only amplified it. Muhammad Ali was the
Was
best,
there
and
a
it got me
fight that
hooked
you
on him.
remember that specifically stands out?
Well, just the first one. I don't think I saw the first one. First
The
one
first
I heard
Frazier
on the
fight?
radio was Sonny Liston.
Oh, the first Liston
Sonny-
fight. Okay.
Yeah, that one I heard on the radio. I didn't see, but when he fought, I mean, he just, the way he ran his mouth, the way he backed it up, and then you had Howard Cosell.
Yeah.
It just Muhammad Ali just he was the absolute best, and to a lesser degree, Secretariat got me hooked on the Triple Crown. Hey, Kevin, I got a question for the host.
Yep.
Have you seen our first 7 games coming out the box for the Redskins? That's a rhetorical question, Kevin.
It better be rhetorical because you know how much I love the schedule. Yes.
Hey, listen, Kevin. It appears from the outside that the team has been counting on Ayuk, and to me, that's putting your brain trust in a guy with judgment issues. To me, that's stupid. Ayuk won't be available until after the bye week, and we need help. Coming out the box with our schedule, we need to sign Diggs, and if we sign Ayuk later, he'll be the cherry on the top. Yeah. And look, we know about Ayuk's lack of judgment, but I'm concerned about the judgment of our brain trust that we don't go out and get Diggs right now. With Diggs, Kevin, we got a top 5 offense, and we got a chance to win it this year. And what we're waiting for is beyond.
I'm not against it. You know me. I'm not against it. I'm surprised how many people don't want Diggs. I'm surprised at that.
Kevin, it's ridiculous. It's malpractice that we don't go for it now. We have an opportunity to go for it now. We have a top 5 receiver tandem with Stephon Diggs, and it's beyond.
Let's not go top 5. Diggs Terry would be top 10ish. Yes.
Top 5. No, I'm talking about the whole receiving core, Kevin.
Who else are you adding to the mix?
Chig. We have a top 5,
tight
Kevin. We need to go for it now. We need help coming out the box with that schedule that we got. And why we don't do something is beyond me. And lastly, Kevin, since I don't talk to you much, hey, listen, it may work out for the Spurs if they want to, but if they want to win multiple rings, they better learn how to get Wemby in the post.
You're going to see that tonight. Don't you, Ivan? You're going to see it right from the beginning tonight. I'd be shocked, and I'd call it coaching malpractice if he doesn't get his first 10 touches from the free throw line down. You cannot have him out there thinking he's Kevin Durant in game 2.
That's absolutely. He can do all that, but he needs to earn his living in the post.
100%.
If they want him to win multiple rings, all right, man, I'm gone. Have a good one.
Robert in Annapolis, what was the game or the moment you were hooked on sports or hooked on a sport?
Well, good morning. I'll actually answer the question. It's like probably most people.
Ivan doesn't call as much as he used to. Let me just tell you, he emails me a lot. So he wanted to get it all in, and because he's a good guy, I'll let him get it all in. So go ahead.
All right. Anyhow, it's probably like most people. The first time I went to a game, so it would have been, I guess, in about 1960. I was spending the summer with my grandparents out in Catonsville, and my father wasn't a big sports fan, but my grandfather was, and he took me to some Oriole games. I remember that first one. It was a night game, and I was an 8-year-old kid.
Was Boog Powell on that team or not?
No, that was before Boog Powell.
Okay.
This was back earlier than that. Gus Triandos was my player as a catcher.
Okay.
But anyhow, so the first time you walk out and you see this big expanse, you watch sports on TV, but that was the first thing. And And a minor point, it was actually 50 years ago yesterday that game.
Yeah, I saw that
played.
during a break, but nobody knows.
Yeah.
Just go with it.
But that took it out of Phoenix because
Yeah.
they didn't. They went home. They moved the 7th game, went to Phoenix, and the Celtics took them out then. But
You remember that game, though, don't you?
Of course, I was a big NBA was my second favorite sport back then. Actually, it's nothing now to me. But anyhow, there you go. That was
all right. Thanks, Robert.
Those were great days for the.
And your description, I remember. I think the first sporting event I was taken to was a Redskins game at RFK, and you're right. You're coming out of that. Out of that tunnel area. We were up in the upper deck, section 513, row 13, seats 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Those were our seats. And looking down on the field, but walking up the ramps to get to the upper deck, you'd catch glimpses of the field, and that was definitely memorable for sure. First time you saw that.
Bullets win in '78 was my favorite basketball game. Got to be yours too.
Wait, which one?
The Bullets,
7?
1978. I was living in Burbank, actually. I was still linked to the home state. And,
you were living in Burbank, LA? Burbank?
I went out there for 1 year, and it was '78, and I did not think they were going to win that game, and I think they got a break when they played. They played in the Sky Dome, whatever they called that big.
No. Game
baseball.
7 was in the Seattle Coliseum, Center Coliseum. Game 5 was in the.
Okay, I remember them playing one in a base.
Yeah, they played the game 5 and I'm sorry, they played game 4 or 5 in the Kingdome, but game 7 was in the Seattle Center Coliseum.
All right, but that was my favorite NBA game of all time. There you go.
Yeah, that was incredible. Who knew that after that night we'd still be looking for the next one? Brian in Tacoma Park. Brian, give me the sporting event, the night, the moment, the day that you remember that hooked you on sports or a sport.
Well, like you, I was already a young fan, but I was really hooked after Magic jumped center against the Sixers.
Yeah.
I said to myself, this is never going to happen again. Nobody's ever going to do this again. I mean, if you maybe LeBron, possibly Wemby in a couple years, but I've never said the same thing about a player in two different contexts. 6'9" point guard, fast, and for those younger listeners, Magic was fast when he was younger. No look passes. How can he do that? And then jumping center, first time.
Yeah.
How could he put up those numbers?
Yeah.
I mean, now clear something up for me if you wouldn't mind, because this may be true. I heard that after that performance by Magic, Ian called in and said, I need to see more. You may be sold.
Yeah, true story. True story. That is absolutely accurate. 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and a block shot, playing 47 of the 48 minutes on the road in Philadelphia's Spectrum, up 3-2 with Kareem back in LA. That 6'9" point guard played center. Now remember, and you know this, he played every position during that game, but he did jump center. And it is still, for my money, the greatest individual performance in NBA Finals history, and one that I was absolutely mesmerized by as well. I was always a Magic guy, and I still am to this day. I still consider Magic to be right there kind of after Mike. And ahead of LeBron on my list of the greatest. I'm also looking at the box score. He was 14 of 14 from the free throw line. He was 14 of 23 from the floor. By the way, you want a sign of the times? The NBA three-pointer at that point in 1980, I think that was year 2, because I think 79 was the first year of the NBA three-pointer. The Lakers as a team were 0 for 2 on threes. And the Sixers were 0 for 6. That's it. 8 total threes shot in Game 6 of those NBA Finals. That's a good one, a really good one, Brian. Thanks for that, because that was that's the one. That's the individual NBA Finals all-time performance. Gary in Frederick. Gary, give me that sporting moment that hooked you on sports.
I was at the game where Frank Robinson hit 2 grand slams against the Senators down in the old D.C. Stadium before it became RFK.
Okay.
And
So you were an Orioles
fan. That was
fan.
awesome. No. Me and my brother were sitting there with our curly W's on, and we were like, oh, crap. But it was so awesome. It was like, it's so cool. He got up again, I think it was in the 8th, and hit the second one, and it was like, man.
Wow.
That was something. And my only second one was when Riggins turned the corner on 4th down against Miami in '82, but I was already a diehard Redskin fan.
Yeah.
All my friends used to call me Howard because I knew all the statistics.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was my second favorite thing of all time.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, the first
Appreciate
one, I was 8 years old. Yeah,
wow.
Frank Robinson. Anyway, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I am just 71's like sort of the first year that I kind of remember. George Allen's first year as the head coach, and I think all the pre-Redskins 71 talk, the Lombardi year, the sunny years in the 60s. I'm not alive for most of them, but I remember 71 on. And in 71, that was the final year of the Senators in D.C. before Bob Short moved the team to Texas, and they still are today, the Texas Rangers, who were originally the Washington Senators. And I do remember going to RFK to a baseball game. And one of the memories, I think I've shared this before, is coming out of the stadium to find out that my father's car had been stolen. Yeah, that's a true story. Ken in Upper Marlboro. Ken, give me that first moment. 50 years ago, it was for me in the NBA, Game 5 of the Celtics-Suns series, considered to be the most exciting and greatest game ever played in the NBA playoffs. That hooked me on the NBA playoffs. What was it for you? Go ahead.
That was one of the games, but the game that actually hooked me, and I think the guy Brian stole my thunder. It was the Magic Johnson Center game. And but Kevin, let me ask you something. Why did you? What night was that game on? The God heard that 3 overtime game. What day was that of the week?
Okay, good question. I'm gonna guess it was the middle of the week. I don't know why I'm guessing that. But it was a night game. It wasn't. Remember, weekends, even back then, they would play the NBA Finals games during the day, not at night. That game was at night because I remember staying up to watch it. So I'm going to guess it was a weekday.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer?
No, I don't, because I'm trying to figure out how did me and my brother stay up. But I remember my mother taking a night shift, and my dad left to go pick her up. And he overruled her that night. And we stayed up. We went crazy. But that Magic Johnson game.
It was a Friday. According to Wikipedia, it was a Friday.
It was a Friday. Okay.
Friday night.
But
yeah.
The Magic Johnson game, that was my prom night.
That was a Friday night, right?
That was a Friday. Exactly. That was my prom night. And we found a radio with one of the maintenance guys in the hotel that we had the prom at. We left our dates for that fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that, Kevin. And we still get reminded of that. We left our dates.
A conversation on my trip with my sons and girlfriends. One of my sons actually said, he goes, I actually think it's pretty selfish to schedule a wedding during football season. And I just said to him, I said, you're an idiot. I'm like, yeah, for people like us, we hate that. But still, the majority of the world doesn't, their schedules aren't contingent on who's playing on Saturday during the fall. But yeah, prom night, I can remember some of those nights too, just following games, by the way, not on a phone, but going to call, I think it was 202 8 the George Michael Sports score line, 865-4444. Now I'm forgetting what it was.
I don't know what signal the guy had, but it's one of the maintenance guys there, and we was trying to find a TV in there, but he didn't have a TV. He had a radio. And we went into the maintenance lounge where they eat lunch, and we stood around that radio. I mean, we went crazy for it. They went crazy. But
Good
Kevin,
call.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yep.
Was that a poor job of coaching the other night? the Spurs coach?
I mean, I didn't like the fact that they continued to let Wemby try to play like he was Kevin Durant. I think we're going to see that be the biggest adjustment. To me, that's got to be the biggest adjustment. He had 6 turnovers. He did not play a good basketball game despite the stat line. And I would imagine that we will see Mitch Johnson make those adjustments. I got to think that Wemby, every single touch, at least early in the game, comes from the free throw line, the elbow, or below it.
Only thing I want to see him to do tonight is just a flash. He can flash up there, but I want him in that post.
There's no reason why he should be initiating the offense as a point guard and trying to take people off the dribble 25 feet from the basket. No reason to do that. The other big adjustment tonight is, will he guard Cat? And instead of, Hart, and because you can play off of Hart. Cat really hurt him in game 1. Thanks for the call, Ken. Appreciate it. I see everybody on hold. Stay there. We'll continue this. 50 years ago, Phoenix and Boston played what has often been referred to as the greatest NBA playoff game of all time. A triple overtime classic that the Celtics won 128-126, included so many insane moments, especially at the end of that second overtime. So many controversial moments, fans involved in the game. It was nuts. It was a game that is just so etched in my memory, and it's one of those games as a kid that just hooked me on the NBA in particular, because I was already hooked on the Skins and the Terps at that point. But it really hooked me on the NBA. And Musburger's calls, man, he really was. If Brent was on the call for something, it always felt bigger. And that may have been his first big night as a play-by-play guy, for sure. If you're on hold, I want the moment that hooked you on a sport or on just sports in general. 301-230-0980. From Kevin. Kevin writes, Alvin Adams never coached, but Dick Van Arsdale did. Still a good point about all of the future coaches from that game. Yeah, I looked it up. You're right. I don't know why I said Alvin Adams. Garherd, Westfall, Dick Van Arsdale, and then from the Celtics, Silas Nelson. Did Dave Cowens coach or not? I need to look that up. I can't remember if he coached or not. But there were several future coaches in that game. 50 years ago tonight. No, Cowens did not coach. 50 years ago, we had the best and most exciting and craziest NBA playoff game. It happened to have been a finals game, Game 5 of the Celtics Suns, a triple overtime thriller that the Celtics ended up winning 128-126. They went on to close out the Suns on the road to win their, at that point, 14th NBA title in Game 6. But that was a game that, for me, left quite the impression, because I'll never forget staying up and watching that game and the impression that it made. And I was hooked on the NBA from that point forward. When was that moment for you, for a sport, for sports in general, where you got hooked? Who's been on hold here for the longest? Let's go to Ronnie in Mitchellville. Ronnie, go ahead.
Peace and love, Kevin.
Peace and love, Ronnie.
Kevin, mine goes back further than 50 years, and you'll remember the event when I say it. 1974, North Carolina State against Maryland, a double overtime ACC game.
Crushing.
Broke my heart. Still, in my opinion, maybe the greatest game I've ever witnessed. We should have won that game, but that hooked me. And back then, I could ride my bike from my parents' house to Coalfield House, and they would left these camps, and you would have Lucas and Mo Howard and all those guys in there playing at night.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's when I got
the 74 ACC final forever was called the greatest game ever. Now, many people will take the Duke-Kentucky Leitner shot game and say that was a better game. But the stakes were, obviously it was an Elite Eight game between Duke and Kentucky. But the stakes for Maryland and then NC State, you're talking about the number 1 team in America against the number 4 team in America. State was 1, Maryland was 4. And the loser went home, and the winner went on to the NCAA tournament. And not only that, the winner went on to the NCAA tournament, Ronnie, as you know, and won the 74 NCAA tournament. David Thompson's NC State team did. And Maryland passed on the NIT, devastated after a 103-100 overtime loss. Yeah, that was crushing.
And it's another topic for another day. But Kevin, I could argue that Maryland State game was better than that Kentucky Duke game. What made the Duke game so it was the last shot, and like you said, final 8. But when you lose and you go home, this is still the same way either way. But they didn't even get a chance to go to the tournament, And in my opinion, they were the second best team in the country that year.
Ronnie, do you have you ever watched that game? It's available on YouTube. Have you ever watched it?
No, but you know what? Now that you told me that, I'm going to watch it this weekend.
Yeah, you got to watch it, because the thing that struck me when I first watched it, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago when I found it on YouTube, was 2 things that I didn't remember. Number 1 was there was 1 turnover in the entire basketball game. 1. And that's why some people say it was the greatest game ever played. But one of the reasons there was only 1 turnover, and make sure you reach back out to me after you watch it, they just didn't guard back then. They let you run offense. There wasn't a lot of defense in the 1974 ACC final. It just became a different game over the years, but you were allowed to sort of just free flow, offensively. And that was the thing that struck me in watching it. But man, old John Lucas was so great, and David Thompson was so great, and Burleson, as you remember, was great in that game. They're 7'4" center.
And Kevin, I know you'll remember this. Who ended up being a professional baseball pitcher?
Stoddard.
In that game?
Yeah, Stoddard.
Yep.
Pitched for the Orioles, won a World Series.
and this is the last thing. I know you got other callers. Just imagine if Thompson could have dunked during that game.
Well, I imagine DT just being able to dunk in general in college basketball, because we saw what it looked like when he got to the ABA and then the NBA. He is still, I think you and I have probably talked about this. For me, he's the best player in college I've ever watched. And that's saying a lot because, even in recent years, we've seen some unbelievable players. But Thompson was literally unguardable in college. They would have won 2 national championships had they not been on probation. Huh?
Yeah. Mo Howard couldn't do anything with him. And Mo was
Owen Brown couldn't. Tom Roy couldn't. Nobody could do anything with him. All right, let me move on. Thanks, Ronnie. Appreciate it. Let's go to our guy G from the shop. G, give me the game that got you hooked on sports or a sport.
You said 50 years, Ken. I'm 44 years old, man.
Yeah.
But, my father used to make me watch the whole games when I stayed home sick because he didn't think I was sick. But that Paul Westphal, he made me watch that game on Betamax, that triple overtime, and he made me watch it again when the Bulls was playing the Suns, and he was like, man, that's Paul Westphal that played in the game, man. That white boy was cold, man.
He was.
And I always remembered that. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, man, 5 years old, my cousin took me to see Hulk Hogan versus Mr. Perfect. And as a 5-year-old, that really, like, man, I'm in awe. You know what I'm saying? And when Warren Moon was with the Oilers, I was like 8 or 9. He was the best football player I had seen at that early age. So I was born a Redskin fan, but Desmond Howard, when he did that Heisman pose, and watching Sean Higgins.
A lot of them.
No, and watching Sean Higgins on the break, that championship year, that's why I'm a Michigan fan. That's why I'm still a Michigan fan to this day. It wasn't the Fab Five. It would have been the Fab Five that would have made it.
It was the 89
Sean
team.
Higgins,
Wow.
Lloyd Vaught, Glenn Rice.
Yeah.
The hell with Ramil Robinson, though. He the only Wolverine I don't fool with because he's a scumbag. That it's a lot of them, Chin, but I loved it, man. I still love it to this day. Michigan fan because I watched that. You know what I'm saying? I watched that Bills comeback against Warren Moon and the Oilers. I remember that. Like
Frank Reich. Yep.
I was like, I think I was 11. I was 11 that comeback year, but I was like 9 when Desmond Howard did the pose. Yeah. I love.
I'll holler
Love
at
it.
you. See you.
Love
Dan
it.
in DC. What was the moment for you?
All right, Kevin. I'm 13 years old. I'm a diehard Tar Heel fan. The son of 2 Maryland alums. Make the trip around the Beltway on January 14th, 1998 to Cole Fieldhouse. Somehow sneak our way in through the press entrance with no tickets. Maryland has a furious comeback, forces overtime, takes down number 1 UNC.
Yeah.
And from that day on, I'm a Terps fan, and it changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow. That I remember that night. I think big old Mike Martisich had a really good game off the bench, and I think Yasikavicius had a good game for them that night, if I recall.
He was he was unbelievable. Yeah, I stormed the court as a 13-year-old and never looked back.
Maryland had I could be wrong about this, but if I'm wrong by maybe one spot. I think Maryland basketball has the most wins over number 1 ranked teams than any other program out there. Now, part of it was they got a lot of opportunities in the ACC with Duke and Carolina all of those years. But they knocked off other number 1s. They beat Florida when Florida was a number 1. So they had other opportunities. But I think there is a stat out there, and if Maryland's not number 1, they are certainly top 2 or 3 in terms of college basketball programs with wins over number 1 ranked programs. And a lot of them came, obviously, against Carolina and Duke. And most of those in Cole Fieldhouse or at Xfinity Center. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. That's a good memory. Let's go to Ed and Frederick. Ed, go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. I know there's a lot of Maryland fans, alumni. What brings back a memory to me is Maryland playing South Carolina in the slowdown game. I just listened to it on my radio. I believe it was South Carolina. It was one of the early times when
lefty held the ball,
shot
right?
clock. Lefty held the ball, and from that moment, it was everything lefty in my life. Being at Cole Fieldhouse when he walked in, just how he electrified the crowd. But that moment, just a memory in my life that I'll never forget.
Yeah, and I've had other people tell me that the win over South Carolina, 1971, is that what it was? I think, and Jim O'Brien was the star on Maryland's team, and they held the ball, and it was like 3-2 at halftime, and they won 31-30 or 32-31. I've had other people tell me that was an absolute like hook for them into college basketball and into Maryland in particular.
That whole team. I think Mo Howard and the redheaded guy,
Jim O'Brien. I don't know that Mo Howard was on that team. I think it was Bodell and I forget some of the other names. Thank you for that, Ed. Appreciate it.
And I'm forgetting a few, but hey, thank you so much.
Let's go to Andre in Clinton. Andre, give me the moment that hooked you on sports or a sport
Kevin, how you
or
doing,
a
buddy?
team.
Love your show.
Thanks, Andre.
Hey, Kevin, I have two. Mine is my dad had season tickets to the Redskins, and my brother and I were Minnesota Vikings fans that drove him crazy. We were huge Chuck Foreman fans, and he actually came home with 3 tickets. We were able to go see the game. Chuck Foreman scored 3 touchdowns, but Washington scored a last-second field goal and won the game. But the experience had me hooked on the NFL. My second one, I had just started boxing, and Sugar Ray fought Wilfred Benitez.
Yeah.
An excellent fight, as you know. And from that point on, I was hooked on boxing. I actually have a boxing collection. People call me a boxing connoisseur. I have whole fights all the way from Jack Johnson up to Benavidez today. Thousands and thousands of whole fights worth thousands.
I remember that Ray won the title that night for the first time against Benitez. And you need to help me with this. Was Benitez dating or married to Sugar Ray's sister? Was that what it was?
Benitez started dating Sugar Ray's sister after the fight.
After the fight. Okay. And it was a 15-round decision, correct?
Well, no, they stopped it in the 15th
They stopped it in
round.
the 15th.
Sugar stopped it. Yep. He put him down and got off about 5 punches, and they stopped it in the corner.
And then obviously his first big defense came against Duran in that first fight in Montreal.
Yeah, and he lost that one, as we all know.
Yeah,
I
that
have one
fight.
more question for you.
Sure.
Shouldn't Chuck Foreman be in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at it. Chuck Foreman, to me, my memories of Chuck Foreman are he was one of the first backs that became, a great pass-catching back out of the backfield, in addition to being a great runner. I also remember the game you're talking about. They actually, I think, blocked a field goal at it was Fred Cox who had a field goal blocked by, I think, Ron McDole. And the Skins won that game in RFK. But I also remember Foreman getting hit in the eye with a snowball in a game in Buffalo, and it partially blinded him, I think.
Yeah, and that was the last game of the season. And he actually, at the time, scored the 23rd touchdown, which became the record that day.
For that year, yeah. Thanks, Andre. Really appreciate it. For those of you that I didn't get to, I apologize, but I enjoyed it. Hope you did too. Up next, Matt Mayoko from San Francisco's NBC Sports Bay Area will join us to give us the latest on Ayuk and the 49ers. just real quickly before we get to Matt, I mentioned that Maryland, I thought, had the most wins over number one teams in college basketball history. Actually, UCLA has the most with 12. Maryland's tied for second with Duke and Kansas with 10 wins over number one ranked teams. Maryland had so many opportunities in the ACC against Duke and Carolina. That's part of it. But you had to win those games as well, and they won a bunch of them. All right, let's turn the conversation back to the NFL and what Washington's going to do at wide receiver. Matt Mayoko has been covering the 49ers for some time as part of the 49ers pregame and postgame live on NBC Sports Bay Area. You can follow Matt on X at Mayoko, Maioocco NBCS. I'll just start with this because I just think there's so much out there. There's so much mystery around it, and especially with the latest, issue of an arrest warrant. What are you guys hearing about what's going on with Brandon Ayuk?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. But yeah,
thanks for coming.
Really
on.
nothing. Yeah, no, really nothing. I mean, he's, people I've talked to who know him and are friends with him haven't spoken to him. It's just kind of been a mystery as far as where he is physically, and I think kind of in where his mindset is. So, he's occasionally pops up on social media doing something, and you mentioned the arrest warrant. He posted video of himself driving at a high rate of speed right down a kind of a residential area, or at least a commercial area, I should say, close to Levi Stadium, right past Levi Stadium in December. But there just is a lot of mystery. Why did he, in essence, kind of ghost the 49ers and prompting the 49ers to void all the guaranteed money remaining on his contract. And then, he didn't dispute that. He didn't fight it at all through the NFLPA. And I think there's a lot of concern about him, just kind of where he is and what his future holds. And, does he, I mean, there's so many questions. I cannot answer a lot more questions than I can answer, such as,
right.
How intent is he to get back on the football field? What is his sense of urgency to continue playing football? I don't know the answers to those questions.
Yeah, I think, from afar, and you guys are closer to it, but still, as you just described, you're still kind of far away because there just isn't a lot of information, because essentially he's been MIA now for a year plus. But at the very least, from afar, you can say, as an observer of the human condition, this guy makes terrible decisions. I mean, he literally had between $30 and $40 million in guaranteed money voided. It's unprecedented what happened. And by the way, I point out all the time, and maybe you would disagree, but there's been no fight to get it back from him, a lawyer representing him, the NFLPA. They know they were in the wrong, I guess.
Yeah, that's the suggestion, definitely. All he had to do was kind of the bare minimum to obtain or claim that $27 million guaranteed. Like that was in the contract. The 49ers, were willing to pay him that, obviously, because they put that in his contract. And, just kind of interesting. A year ago, when training camp started, he's rehabbing the significant knee injury that he had from the previous season. We saw him out on the field quite a bit. He would be out there during warm-up drills, running routes on air. And, I was under the impression, like, man, look at him. He's so eager to get back out there. And, I was told by someone very high up that, I think he's doing that for you guys. I think he's, doing that to, so that people see him, on camera and post on social media and everything else. But, behind the scenes, when we weren't out there, he wasn't out there either. And so it remains to be seen. There are a lot of areas here where there's a lot of hazy area. And this one is, does he want to continue playing football? The suggestions are, looking at what he did on his social media, he basically unfollowed everybody except for his wife, Jaden Daniels, and the Washington Commanders. So that would lead you to believe that he wants to play for the Commanders. But again, that urgency is in question. If he does come back, if he gets a shot with some team, is he going to be in a position physically and mentally to take advantage of it? It's just, you can't just roll out there and expect to make a football team and play high level football when you haven't been working up to it. So I don't know. I mean, it's Fournier still hold his rights.
Yep.
He's remains on the reserve left squad list. Up to this point, there's been no indication of when the 49ers will release him. It's quite clear that no team's going to trade for him. And then, the team that everybody's keeping an eye on is the Washington Commanders.
Right.
And they have some questions that they need to answer too. And they have to clear some hurdles as far as that as well. I mean, is this something that the Commanders want to take that on? And I mean, he would be coming to the team because of Jaden Daniels. Seems to me like Jaden Daniels already has enough on his plate. A lot of pressure on him to play winning football. I'm not sure it would be in the best interest of that organization to put that on Jaden Daniels' shoulders as well, to basically be responsible for Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, you don't want to have to end up being, the padded fifth floor for a guy that's not exactly stable, if that's what it ends up becoming. I do want to ask you about sort of the perspective of 49er fans on this, but I want to go back a little bit also. What was he like? Were there any indications at the end of 23 when you guys lose the Super Bowl in overtime to the Chiefs? He was outstanding in 23. I remember just as a football fan saying that Ayuk is really good and he is ascending. Like, this guy's on the verge of becoming a truly upper tier wide receiver. What was it like in terms of him as a teammate, him in the media, him and fans? What did you guys think of him at the end of 23?
I've always liked Brandon Ayuk. I think he's I had some very enjoyable conversations with him at his locker. And you're right. In 2023, he was one heck of a football player. He was, he never really had a breakout season because he started off at a pretty high level and just kind of kept gradually, kind of continually going in an upward trajectory. So the first times I started to hear, negativity about him was after that 2023 season and the contract situation that he had going into the 2024 season. And that's the year where, the 49ers and he had, kind of a contentious, maybe it wasn't even contentious because the 49ers would put a contract offer out there and it would just kind of sit out there for a long period of time. They wouldn't hear from him. And finally, I know the 49ers had some deals worked out, some trades worked out with some other teams that were basically contingent on Brandon signing off on it to get a new contract with some other team. And then ultimately, I think there were indications then that, maybe his urgency to play football wasn't what the 49ers wanted it to be. And eventually Kyle Shanahan, I think, just kind of lost patience and was like, okay, what the heck? Do you want to play? The contract that he ended up signing had been offered 3 weeks earlier, and it sat there untouched for 3 weeks. And then right before the start of that season, Brandon Ayuk signed the deal and then got off to a slow start and had just started to look like the Brandon Ayuk of 2023 when he sustained that knee injury. So the only time where I started to think like, okay, what's going on here, would have been during the contract negotiations the summer of 2024. And then it's just kind of been weird, ever since then.
Yeah, that makes sense because I remember we were talking about it here because he wanted to get traded to Washington, and he put that Jaden Daniels practice video out on social media that was obviously supposed to remain between him and his former college quarterback. And it was at that point, I think even from afar, we started to question maybe his judgment. We're talking to Matt Mayoko of NBC Sports out in the Bay Area. So is it true that if he just had reported to any of these OTA days that the 49ers would have been forced to either release him or change the, reserved left squad status? Or is that not true?
Well, I don't know the specifics on that, but that would seem to make sense to me. If he's on the reserve left squad list and he remains under contract to the 49ers, if he just had reported and showed up, I think that would have forced the 49ers hand to do something. Quite obviously with the level of discontent or however we want to term it that Brandon Ayuk has with the team or his current situation, I doubt that the 49ers would have wanted him in the locker room. And so I think, to my knowledge, it would have forced the 49ers hand to do something.
Why didn't he just do it? I know it would have been awkward.
I don't know. I don't know. But
there's no other opportunities. Am I right about that? That Kyle canceled minicamp and there are no more OTA days?
That is correct. Yeah.
So the next time would be day one of training camp.
The opening. Yeah. Yes. And I don't know how this is going to, I know how it's going to play out. He's not going to step on the field for the San Francisco 49ers ever again, but I don't know how it gets to that point. And at what point he is allowed to go play for someone else. And we don't know, I guess the, circumstantial evidence is that he appears to want to play for the Washington Commanders, but I'm speaking for myself here and probably a lot of other people too who are closer to him than I am. I don't know where he is as far as his relationship with football. If he
it sounds like nobody even knows where he is. Period.
Yeah, and I know Adam Schefter had reported several weeks ago that even teams that were interested or just wanted to do a little bit of homework as far as pursuing a trade, that they couldn't even get in touch with him. So I don't know if I know he has a relationship with Adam Peters. I would assume that the 49ers have given teams or his Brandon Ayuk's representation permission to speak to other teams. So I don't know if Adam Peters has made any contact with them or not, but that's certainly the team. I guess it can work both ways. A team that would want him would be either a team that knows him well, but maybe if a team knows him well, maybe they know him too well, and maybe he'd have better luck with a team that doesn't know him. I don't know. It's I've covered this league a long time, and I've never come close to.
People say that. People say this is truly the like one of one in terms of, especially when it comes to the voiding of guaranteed dollars. That just is so hard to pull off. Yet
it is. Yeah. It is. And the thing, you're a professional football player. He put in, some really good seasons to get to that point where he earned that contract. He earned it. He earned that money. He earned the guaranteed money. And for him to just not live up to the terms of the contract and to see $27 million just evaporate is mind-boggling.
Look, I've said this, that if I were a 49er fan, I wouldn't want them to release him until the last possible moment. Why would I want my competitor, a potential competitor in the NFC, to get him for the entire summer? Why would I be doing him any favors? So I think there's still a possibility. I guess he could show up and make it uncomfortable for them. But do you think there's a possibility, if not a likelihood, that they don't release him until August 31st, the day before they actually have to pay him anything?
Well, they don't have to pay him anything, period, until he shows up.
Right. But I think the next trigger
would,
date, the roster bonus would be September 1st, from what the guy at Spot Track told me.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. I mean, this is such an unprecedented thing. I mean, a lot of these questions I don't even have the answers to because I've never dealt with this before. But, I don't think a person would qualify for a roster bonus or anything of that nature if he's on the reserve left squad list.
Yeah, maybe.
And again, as far as kind of pushing it and taking a step that forces the 49ers hand, he hasn't shown a willingness to do that either, such as what we were talking about, just showing up and saying, okay, I'm here, take me off the reserve left squad list. And I mean, in my mind, that would be the quickest way for him to become a free agent and move on with his career if that's what he desires.
Let's talk some football because your team's been so interesting to follow because the injuries that it had last year, the year before they went 6-11. Last year, they were able to have a really good regular season. And then obviously Seattle, absolutely obliterated them twice in 3 weeks to end the season. I'm a Kyle guy. Mike and Kyle were here and I still talk to Mike every once in a while. Love the Shanahans, and I've rooted for Kyle from afar, unless they're playing Washington, of course. And I thought last year, Matt, going into the season, that not that he would ever have his job be in jeopardy necessarily, but I thought there was some pressure on him to get them to an actual victory in the Super Bowl. I mean, he's been to a couple, but they haven't won them. And last year, they kind of overachieved when you consider all the players that they didn't have. What is the state of the feeling about Kyle Shanahan in the Bay Area?
Well, I think it's mixed in the Bay Area, but inside the building, it's not mixed at all. I think that they realize that if they were to ever move on from Kyle Shanahan, chances are great that they would be taking a step down at the head coaching position. He's that good, and I think he's universally recognized as, whatever that number is, one of the top 3, 4, 5, 6 coaches in the NFL. So the only thing you can say about him, and it's a big thing, I guess, for an organization that has 5 Lombardi trophies, is that he hasn't won the last big one. People say, well, you can't win the big one. Well, he's won a lot of playoff games, and those, last I checked, those are all big wins. And he even had one, last year, which was completely unexpected with the level of injuries and what they faced last year going to Philadelphia and beating the Eagles. But I when speaking to ownership and management, I think they know what they have. And I don't, maybe in the old days where, there was such an emphasis on, the pressure of winning a Super Bowl and Super Bowl or bust. I'm not sure that mentality necessarily works anymore. He's considered a very good coach. Players like playing for him because he is all about football. There's no catchy rah-rah speeches or anything of that nature. It's a very, in the moment kind of coaching philosophy of, let's look at the film and let's talk about how you can be better on this play and what we need to do to win this game. So in that sense, he enters his 10th season and his message hasn't gotten old because his message is constantly evolving in a very in the moment message of how to win football games. So the fan base, I think, is frustrated because, the last time they won a Super Bowl was January of 1995. That's a long, long time. They've gotten close, and therein lies, where the frustration is of, under Harbaugh one Super Bowl that they could have won, and under Shanahan 2 Super Bowls that they could have won and had leads in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Right. Baltimore, Kansas City twice.
Yep.
So last one, I mean, they're loaded in terms of star players for sure. And they've added Mike Evans to the mix. The 49ers have. I think they added Christian Kirk as well. Health-wise, is Bosa going to be back healthy? Fred Warner back? What about Kittle? What are you guys expecting just, in terms of early in the season and having everybody ready to go?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it is a very good roster, like, one of the better rosters in the NFL. It just so happens for them that probably the best roster in the NFL, which took a nice little boost this week, was Myles Garrett coming to the Rams. But Kittle is up in the air. He tore his Achilles in that playoff game against the Eagles, but he's making really good progress. He thinks that there's a strong chance that he'll be available to play week 1. However, what's working against him is obviously the fact that it's an Achilles, but week 1 for the 49ers comes 3 days earlier than the other teams, and 16 to 18 hour flight to get there. So if he's not available week 1, he's fully expected to be ready, week 2, 3, somewhere around that area. Bosa should be ready at the start of training camp. Fred Warner could have, or probably would have, played in the playoffs if the 49ers had, it was a big ask, but if they'd somehow gotten past Seattle, Fred Warner was very much on target to play. So he's fine. The only other injury that could carry over into the regular season would be Michael Williams, first round draft pick from last year. There's a pretty decent chance, I would think, if he comes off an ACL, that he'll start the season on PUP, but should be available to play the bulk of the season. So from a health standpoint, and you mentioned some of the players they've added, Osa Odighizuwa, the defensive tackle, comes over from the Cowboys in a trade. I think they've, by and large, they've done a good job of the off season. A year ago, if you and I were talking, we'd be talking about all the players that left the 49ers. This year, it was, the guys that they added and the team that they kept together, and even bringing back Dre Greenlaw. So I think they're in a really good spot. I'm sure a lot of teams feel the same way, but it's a veteran team, and, the veteran guys can't play forever. So it's got to be kind of a, now or never type of mentality.
Yeah, I mean, getting Trent re-signed, I keep thinking eventually it's going to run out on him, but it isn't. I'm looking at something. I wonder, I may be wrong about this, but I wonder the last time the top 2 favorites to win the Super Bowl were from the same division, because the Rams are at plus 600 right now, sort of as a consensus. The Seahawks are at like plus 950, 10-1 roughly. I mean, that division with those 3 teams is on paper insane. You never know how it'll work out, but I can't remember the last time a division had the top 2 Super Bowl favorites in it.
Yeah, and then as you noted, I mean, 49ers probably, they can't be too far behind either, right?
No, they're probably
they got to be like 5th or 4th, 5th or 6th, something like that.
They're at 18-1. They're about they're tied for like 6th. Yeah, exactly.
6th. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I do think that I would have said, before the trade of Myles Garrett coming to the Rams, I would have said that kind of throw a blanket over those 3 teams. And, I would say the Rams would have been, a favorite. And I think the Seattle Seahawks right behind the Rams and the 49ers right behind Seattle. But I don't think I would have been surprised at all if any one of those three teams emerges as, the winner of the NFC West or just the NFC in general. Now, I do think, just on paper, that the Rams are a prohibitive favorite. They have the reigning MVP and the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. So, that clearly is a separator.
No doubt.
Oh, and one more note, Kevin. You were talking about Trent Williams. So he did sign a new deal that basically assures that he'll be on the team this year and next year. So he has a lot of guaranteed money for next year that, of course, would disappear if he stopped playing. But he did say 2 days ago, we talked to him, and he did say that, yes, it has definitely crossed his mind and maybe even a likelihood that he's going to play this year, next year, and then that'll be it. So it's still a couple of years down the road. He wants to be a good dad and be there for move-in day or whatever else his daughter's going through as she wraps up her high school journey and then moves on to college. So he has definitely already kind of thought along those lines of, the end is in sight, and it might very well be this year, next year, and then riding off into the sunlight or sunset, and then 5 years later we'll be partying with him.
Will he go down? I'm thinking about like Joe Staley's probably in the conversation, but who will go down as the greatest offensive lineman in 49ers history? Because Trent's going to be a part of the conversation, right?
Oh, absolutely. The only thing that he wouldn't have necessarily would be, a whole lot of years with the 49ers. But I mean, I think you'd have to go back a long, long way to maybe like Bob St. Clair. But, if you're talking about Hall of Fame offensive linemen, I mean, the 49ers had some really good offensive linemen, but no one, who's been labeled as a Hall of Famer. With Randy Cross and Harris Barden and Jesse Sapolo and Guy McIntyre, guys like that. But I would say as far as the seasons that he's given the 49ers, there's just nobody like him. I mean, he's one of one. He's the guy that can play in any system. The 49ers demand that their offensive linemen be agile and athletic and, can hit a moving target. And usually what that means is you're rolling with smaller offensive linemen. Well, Trent Williams gives teams the best of both worlds with the size, the strength, and the athleticism to be able to execute the blocks that, generally speaking, only smaller offensive linemen can do. So, I've never seen anybody like him.
The morons here traded him for a couple of mid-round picks to the Niners. I mean, it was kind of a messed up situation with Trent here at the end, but God, his talent has just been all world since the moment he arrived in the NFL. Matt, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time.
All right, Kevin, my pleasure. Have a good week.
Matt Mayoko, everybody from NBC Sports Bay Area. Ben Standig will join us next. All right, finishing up this week with our own Ben Standig. Just had somebody on from San Francisco talking about Ayuk. I mean, they know just as little as about him as we do. I mean, and I can't even get an answer on whether or not if he reports, because I've seen some information out there, but I don't know how accurate it is, that if he were to report, would they immediately cut him? Oh, if that's true, why wouldn't he just have reported to one of those OTA days? Well, maybe because he's an idiot. How you doing?
Dude, I'm doing all right. This is why this whole Ayuk thing is weird. We're obviously hyper focused on it because the expectations, the assumption that whenever he is free, he would come here. But the idea that, like you just said, like that the people there don't even know what is seemingly happening. I keep making the joke that this is the one time I want to see a player workout video. I want to see a video of Ayuk doing something, lifting weights, running,
something self-promotional.
Yeah, anything that suggests he's interested in playing football. The other day when I asked Jaden about Ayuk's future, like, what's your sense? I literally wasn't asking, is he coming here? Knowing he's not going to say that. It literally is, does he want to play? Like, what is the deal with this? It is that's the part to me that is truly the bizarre part. I get why these guys would potentially want him, but I've never seen a situation where a guy is this MIA and yet everybody's assuming he's going to just keep playing. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Meantime, there's some, it's this time of year, you get people surmising, people, thinking out loud in their writing, like Dan Graziano and the guy from Sports Illustrated talking about Kayshon Boutte perhaps being moved from New England, and Washington would be a likely, interested party. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that New England would trade Boutte, that part I totally get in light of, they signed Romeo Dobbs, they get A.J. Brown, that I get. I guess you'd have to tell me a couple things. Like, one, what's the cost? After what Adam Peters gave up the last couple of years for Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil, I just don't get the sense that he is really looking to trade picks, especially when 2027 is also viewed as this big-time class. So that's the part to me, I don't know. So you got to tell me what the pick is. If it's sort of a late day 3, well, sure. But so there's that. Beyond that, look, he's a guy that's been a talented player. As I said, I really haven't considered the fit here per se on the field, but yeah, I mean, on the surface, he would be an upgrade over what they have at number 2. Sure.
Is there anybody that you're sensing they're high on that might surprise fans? I mean, I know everybody's living not everybody. Some people are living with, sort of the play-by-play of some of these OTA days, et cetera. And there have been some nice things said about Jaden Bradley, the undrafted free agent. There have been some nice things said about Treylon Burks, including from David Blau. Let's just say we're going into 2026 with the group they have. Who would you be optimistic about after Terry?
I don't know that my opinions have changed from where they started, which is to say, it's an uncertain room. I mean, I do think, I keep going back to the De'Ami Brown, bringing him back, not to suggest that I think De'Ami Brown is the starting Z and everybody else can go watch him play, but he brings back that speed element that we saw they just did not have last year, especially when Terry was hurt. They just didn't have anybody else besides him. And just having that element, I think, is key. Just like having a guy like who's a vertical receiver in Treylon Burks. Potentially Jalen Lane. I don't know how much he's going to play on the outside, but like you have a guy with 4.3 speed in Lane, et cetera. Like I think they have better pieces that fit to sort of form a composite receiver over there. But I don't know that I'm sitting here going they have a guy that. I mean, Antonio Williams might be the wild card, but it's just too early to say for sure. But I don't think there's a guy. I know people really want Treylon Burks to happen. I mean, I don't know what to say. it's based on his career. I'm not sure why we're saying that. Like, why wouldn't you just say that about De'Ami Brown? We actually saw him be really successful at the end of the 2024 season with this quarterback. But because we saw the whole story, we'd kind of know, well, this really was not that was more of a blip. And I think with Burks, it's sort of the same thing. He's not done anything consistently to suggest that he's the guy, even though he was a first-round pick. So, yeah, answer to your question is no. I don't think there's anybody for me that is standing out, with the acknowledgement that we just haven't seen Antonio Williams do enough yet.
If they don't add another receiver, and let's just say that they struggle at the position in 2026, what level of culpability will Adam Peters have for that?
I mean, I think a decent amount. Like, on the one hand, in the 3 drafts, he takes Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd, Jalen Lane in the 4th, and now Antonio Williams in the 3rd. Okay, that's not nothing. Terry McLaurin was a 3rd-round pick, right? I mean, it's not like you can't find a guy. On the other hand, I mean, if none of them really kind of work out to the degree that you would expect somebody being at least a quasi starter, then that's I don't know, some form of poor drafting. So at a minimum, it's that. At a maximum, it's how are you not at a point when you have this extra cap space before Jaden Daniels gets paid that you didn't go harder in the way New England did with receivers for Drake May, the way the Bears did with receivers for Caleb Williams, the way the Broncos did this offseason for Jalen Waddle, et cetera. So that to me would be like, why didn't you take a full advantage? Now, granted, they tried to go get Alec Pierce.
Yep.
They tried to get Dobbs. So not saying they didn't try, but
right. Well, this is one of those. That's the answer. Like, hey, it's not that we didn't try, we just didn't land on anybody that we tried for.
Yeah, and look, as I said, there's some discipline in saying, hey, just because we were willing to spend a ton of money to get Pierce, doesn't mean we're just going to spend a lot of money on anybody. Like, it is certain guys were willing to do it for, and others were not. But at the same point, it didn't happen. So, yeah, I mean, I think it would be tough. I guess that however it needs to happen, that you didn't sort of go more all in on the Jaden front. Now, I will say that if you say to me right now, who's ultimately going to be the number 2 target, I would probably say Chig Okonkwo. And if he's able to provide that athletic power, yards after the catch aspect that, he demonstrated with the Titans, but now he can do it a bit more if they, let him run more routes than he was able to run in Tennessee, then maybe that's the answer. Just like, you wouldn't say Patrick Mahomes always had a great number 2 receiver, but he had Travis Kelce. I'm not saying Okonkwo was that. I just mean, the tight end can be that guy. And maybe that's where this is headed. That maybe that is the move they made. They didn't get Pierce, so they went and got that guy. And maybe that's the answer, and that's not a bad way to go. But other than that, yeah.
Was Ertz the number 2 target in 24? Had to be, right? After Terry? In terms of targets? Had to be.
I think so. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I would think so. I mean, Noah Brown obviously just didn't play enough. Eckler missed a fair amount of games.
Yeah, he was. 91 Terry was targeted 117 times. Ertz 91 times. Ertz did have the second most receptions. Then it was Zacchaeus. Well, Noah Brown only played in 11 games and was targeted 56 times. So it's very possible that had he played a full season, he would have been. I was just trying to think of, when you said Okonkwo being the number 2 targeted guy, that makes a lot of sense to me. But they haven't had a true number 2 yet with Jaden.
Right, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like he's now been here. This is going into year 3, and it's funny. We talk about with Terry during his career how he played with until Jaden. He had different quarterbacks every single year. He's also what's been the best number 2 receiver he's had since he's been here. I mean, you could argue Deebo Samuel last year, but that really wasn't.
And he didn't get to play with him enough. Yeah,
right. And also Deebo's not a real number 2 receiver, but okay, So, yeah, I mean,
I think he really did. I think he liked Noah Brown. I mean, in 24, when Noah Brown was available, he did get targeted, 56. Yeah. I mean, he basically averaged close to, 5.5 targets per game which would have been second to Terry had he played the whole season. But that was his issue, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. We got a few minutes left in the show, and I have not yet talked about game 2 tonight. You and I haven't talked on air about game 1 in the NBA Finals. I do want to make a pick on tonight's game before the show ends, and we'll do that with Ben, who's watching intently these NBA Finals. So what did you think of game 1, and how do you think it sets up for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, look, I said the Spurs to win the series, but I believe I said with you the other day that I feel less confident about that in this series than I did in the last series. I just thought that the Wemby-Chet matchup would ultimately play out the way that it did. In this case, it was more like, I think the Knicks have – I mean, they have guys who are not going to back down, with obviously Jalen Brunson being the most obvious. And if you're the Spurs, I know it's easier said than done, but you can't let a game get within like 4 or 5 points late and that guy's on the court for the other team. It's unbelievable what he's able to pull off. And he pulls off these, like, you know, old man at the playground shots where you're just like, where is this angle coming from? I think, though, the real key for that game was that Karl Anthony Towns played like a guy who, you know, like a legit center.
He really did.
Who crashes the board.
I was so impressed, and I was kind of happy for him. I don't know why. I was glad. I think there were so many eyes on him, and how would he come out? Would he be aggressive? Would he, you know, not just be like, you know, hey, I'm a facilitator. That's all. No, he was my, in hockey parlance, he was my number one star of the night.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what flipped, because they just don't have any other size, basically. If he's not able to stay on the court and give them those big man moments, then they'd have a problem. And that's the thing. I mean, this was a guy who was the number one pick in the draft when he came out. Uber talented. It's just that it's been, you know, erratic at times. But when you see the ceiling, you're like, oh, okay, this is why he's one of those guys that, you know, you can talk yourself into building around. So if he's able to do that and, you know, hit some threes, then that really not nullifies Wembanyama, but it lessens the gap between what he can do at his peak versus what Towns can do. So, you know, I think the other thing with the Spurs is just that, look, I'm not so much worried about the youth because they just beat OKC with these same kids, but at the same point, you know, it is the next level. It is playing for the title. You are playing, like I said, against a Knicks team that is not afraid. So, you know, how do you set up? I think one of the problems I've had with the Spurs all along, not the kids, is that they're vets. Like De'Aaron Fox is unfortunately a bit limited. He's playing well, but, you know, still he's clearly not 100%. And then you've got Harrison Barnes. Look, I said this nicely. What an absolute choke job that guy is in these games. You can go back. He's played the last 4 games he's played in the finals, going back to when he was with the Warriors. People think that the Warriors lost that series at Cleveland 3-1 because Draymond got kicked out. No, they lost because Harrison Barnes was an absolute brick. He was basically.
Well, they would have won had Draymond not been kicked out of Game 5.
No, I know, but I'm just saying. But like Harrison Barnes, all he had to do was make like 40% of the shots. I think it's something like in the last 3 games then, and then this game 1. He's like 5 for 35 or something from the field in those 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a decade of gap. I'm just saying they don't have another. They're missing a vet. They're missing a guy who can come in when things are, you know, get a little tight, who can, you know, calm things down, hit a shot. They don't really have that guy. So the kids have played unbelievable, but there is some realistic, like, hey, you know, it's
funny that you're focused on the guy that's probably averaging 5 minutes a game in the playoffs, in Harrison Barnes.
But that's sort of my point, though. Like when they go to the bench, I mean, Dylan Harper, but they don't have an extra piece. I mean, right now the Knicks.
Well, they do have Keldon Johnson. He was the 6th man of the year. I mean,
he only played 8 minutes the other game.
I know.
Which is what
I'll tell you what. Harper only played 3 minutes in the 4th quarter. I don't know what that was about. That seems strange to me.
Yes, 100%. So I don't know what was going on with some of those choices. But, you know, look, I mean, this is how these things go, right? both teams have star players, but then the Knicks have Landry Shamet, who's come in from nowhere, essentially a complete journeyman his whole career.
Shamet and Alvarado were huge in the first half when Brunson was struggling. I mean, Hart would have gotten my second star after Cat because, I mean, the guy just is so relentless. I mean, he really is a competitive SOB. 48 minutes a night. I love watching him. But Shamet and Alvarado, I thought, were huge in the first half when Brunson was struggling, and Brunson was out. For they with the injury, they sat him a little bit more. I bet, Ben, this 12-game run that they are on it's historic. Like, not only is the margin of victory during this 12-game streak the most in playoff history, they've outscored their opponents by 272 points over 12 straight wins. It's the best 12-game streak margin of victory ever in the history of the game, regular season or postseason. I mean, I look. You're right, and I know what you're going to say, and I totally agree with you. Cleveland was a joke. Philly was a bit of a joke. They would have not had that, ability to do to Boston had Boston survived that series. But man, they are figuring it out right now. It's actually really fun to watch them.
Yeah, and in fairness, because you're right, I did say that. Well, look who they played in the Eastern.
You're not wrong.
Conference to get here. But in fairness to them, as we see in every sport, just because you're the dominant team doesn't mean you win every game or win every game.
Sure, especially by 24.
Fashion.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, Michael Jordan, in order to hit game winners, meant the game was close. So. Yeah, so what they're doing is remarkable. That forget the other team, that they game in and game out have come out and just gone super hard and played super well. That is wildly impressive. And like I said, between Brunson, this version of Towns, Bridges, Hart, like they've got guys who, you got to be, who are not going to shy away from the moment.
Nope.
By the way, does Jay Wright get a ring if they win this whole thing?
He should. All right, I'm up against it. We went way over. I actually like the Spurs tonight to bounce back and win game 2 and this 12-game win streak. They're laying 5.5, 6. I kind of like them by the number plus. Who do you like quickly?
Yeah, I like them too. I'm actually going to be hosting on your station from 6:30 to 9, so I'll talk about it tonight. But I like the. I
was just about to promote tonight, 6:30 to 9. Ben Standig on the Team 980. Max told me about it right before you came on. I have it written down right here. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Window Nation, buy 4, get 4 free. Don't turn down that deal if you're in the market for new windows. Add to that financing. No money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 2 years. Call for your free in-home estimate, 866-90-NATION, or head to windownation.com. Enjoy the weekend. I'll be back Monday. Chris Russell is next.